Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with a National Signing Day edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. Strap in for this one because we have a lot to talk about. National Signing Day, and I'm only going to talk about for this episode the high school signees today. I know there's been a lot of movement since my last show with the incoming transfers since last week. Cornerback Aiden Garnes, TJ Crandall, safety Josh Minkins Jr., wide receiver Jaden Bray, edge rusher Ty French, and linebacker Reed Carico, all committing to West Virginia as transfers. But I want today to just be about the high school guys and West Virginia's high school player recruiting. I'll preview the Dukes Mayo Bowl on Tuesday, a recap of that game on Thursday, then come back for a final 2023 recap and look ahead to 2024, by which time in the first week of January we'll have more guys transferring out, more guys transferring in. So still a lot to talk about over the next couple of weeks with transfer recruiting. But today's day is to talk all about the high school signees. And for me, growing up, this used to be the biggest day of the year for me. I can remember back in 2010, in every single high school class that I was in, refreshing rivals.com. This was kind of like pre-Twitter becoming so like popular and mainstream and used for college recruitment. So refreshing rivals.com to a T to check on Latuan Anderson, and I feel like that's where my passion for high school college recruiting for football was born, was just watching that journey, that saga between him, committing at the U.S. Army All-American game for West Virginia and then flipping on National Signing Day to Miami. It started there. I'm so passionate about high school recruiting, but the danger is putting any sort of stock, any sort of I feel like mental health or mental capacity into the whims and desires of really 16 to 18-year-olds. You're setting yourself up, who are, alpha males in their sport, you're just setting yourself up for craziness. And I feel like that's the case with today's biggest recruiting, news for West Virginia, as a player who'd committed to 3 schools in the matter of a year. So West Virginia being the last and most important one. So, but then again, today's National Signing Day for high school recruiting isn't as big as it even was just a few years ago before the transfer portal. But at the end of the day, still, high school recruiting is the name of the game for college football success, because it's the Jimmies and the Joes that mean more than the X's and the O's in the grand scheme of things. And it's because of the blue blood programs like Georgia, like Alabama, like Ohio State that bring in the 5s and the 4 stars in double digits. They are the haves, and everybody else, West Virginia included in that next tier outside the top 20, top 30, are fighting to get to about a half a dozen 4 stars commits. So it's not fair. It's definitely not fair at all in the world of college football recruiting, but I love it nonetheless. And we have a lot to talk about with this West Virginia football recruiting class. 22 signees in the class, according to the major 4 recruiting networks. I predominantly choose Rivals. I've been I feel like going back over a decade now between Rivals and then Scout, which I feel like is kind of morphed in of a way into what is now today's 247 Sports. So I look at Rivals, I look at 247, I look at On3, I look at ESPN. Those are my, I would say, big 4 recruiting services out there that I check into, but predominantly just stick with Rivals. So Rivals ranked in the team ranking, national team rankings, West Virginia's class in is the 42nd school in the country, 247 48th, On3 51st. And because West Virginia was outside the top 50 on ESPN, they only ranked the top 50. ESPN I consider down as the 4th best recruiting service, because I just don't think they have the investment into it like the other 3 services do. So it's kind of lacked, especially most recently, as ESPN is kind of in flux in many different ways. And just, I think high school football recruiting was already down on ESPN.com's list of priorities, and now it's just gotten so much deeper. So I'm going to talk predominantly for today's show about what the Rivals rankings and the way that they rated their prospects. So, but starting off today's show, 5 minutes in, and buckle up because it's going to be a long one. I feel like I'm going to tick off both factions of West Virginia Nation, and I'm just going to apologize up front because those who are over the moon excited about the momentum they can see with West Virginia having, with this year's transfer portal recruiting, now bringing in 3 more high school commits than you were anticipating, including a 4-star wide receiver, and having the roster really built out so much better than West Virginia even had at the end of the regular season just about a month ago. I'm a little less optimistic than a lot of those folks, but I'm much more optimistic than the sourpuss fans out there who have their blinders on with tunnel vision, who are just absolutely not going to be satisfied until the day Neal Brown is fired. So I want to be real about this class in the way that I analyze it, considering West Virginia's current roster, the transfer portal, the student athletes' impatience in today's world of wanting to wait 3 years or more to play. So what I'll just say right up front is I think there may only be at a max about a half a dozen players who actually contribute meaningful snaps outside of the Albany game next year in 2024. The entire class consists of, for the most part, project players and or guys who are going to have to fight their way through the depth chart in 2025 and 2026 to see the field. So, which is a good thing, in all honesty, because of competition breeding success. When you have more players who are at this or at the same or greater level, it's going to make the upperclassmen, like on edge, to not get complacent, to not rest on their laurels, to work hard every single day because an underclassman is chomping at their heels, wanting to get onto the field, and then vice versa. By the underclassmen have to strive hard against the upperclassmen who are, a year or two, just like high school. They're older than you, so they might be more physically developed than you. They have more, experience at a higher level. So again, competition breeds success. So that's all that you really can ask for. And it's so much better for West Virginia coming into the year 2024 than it was coming into the year 2019 or even 2020 with what West Virginia had from a roster standpoint. But I could really see a lot of these guys in this class getting recruited over if West Virginia's trust the climb truly becomes make the ascension, as I called it about a month ago. If NIL support continues to increase the way it has in the last few weeks, and WVU's competing toward a Big 12 championship. And now, here's where I think context very much matters with this class, because you look at the ranking, and before Day Farmer's commitment today, West Virginia was staring down at like 51st or 53rd ranking, which would have been their lowest rated class. I looked this up, according to Rivals, since the 2006 class. And I think the reason why the 2006 class was rated so low, again, coming off a Sugar Bowl victory the year prior, and then, of course, winning the Gator Bowl in 2006, was just because West Virginia only had 16 guys. And that was because that roster back in 2006 didn't have a lot of upperclassmen. Pat White, Steve Slayton, and looking at their offensive line, they had some turnover after that Sugar Bowl year, but then they were really rebuilding, and that's when you can remember in 2007, a lot of their studs were juniors and seniors. So, just goes to show. But when you consider with the context for this year's recruiting class, if you consider high school recruiting culture in 2023, Neal Brown's roster management and developmental philosophy, and now everything that happened with the WVU football program from, I'll say, September of 2022 all the way to August of 2023, so it feels like forever ago, but really, when you think about it, that was just 4 months ago, how all of that time, during that time, affected this class. Because in today's recruiting culture, 75% or more of high school recruiting is now done, it feels like, by the end of July of recruits' senior year. So much differently, even than I would say just 5 years ago, pre-COVID. They'll do unofficial visits, camps, 7-on-7s throughout high school, collect offers predominantly in their junior years, pick out their 5-6 camps as rising seniors, where they may also take their official visits, and then commit by June, July, August. So they're locked in by the start of their high school senior seasons. They'll sign by December, here on December 20th. They'll often enroll, take classes, and start training in January to take part in spring practice. So, high school recruiting is incredibly accelerated. And I say that again, only exacerbated by the COVID pandemic in 2020. So it puts the onus on this recruiting staff and the predominantly assistant coaches to identify these players earlier, build relationships 2 or more years when these kids are, say, 15 and 16 years old. So it's 100% true when announcers say player-coach mentorships are usually a 6 years or more journey, and coaches need to adjust to players' timelines. So let's go back in time. Let's go back in the time machine to just this past summer, which again feels like forever ago, but was just 4 to 6 months ago, and set the scene, which is much different today than it was then. Neal Brown coming on into the season on the coaching hot seat, coming off a 5-7 season without a bowl game appearance and a backyard brawl loss, didn't have contend for a conference title. Nobody was drafted in the NFL draft last year. A new wide receivers and tight ends coach, with your offensive coordinator Graham Harrell leaving for Purdue. So a lot of uncertainty with the program, not a lot of momentum, and just before new general manager Drew Fabianich was hired. So this staff back then in going back probably 8 months ago as they accelerated into the summer, so probably right after the spring game, had to really project what this 2024 roster was going to look like. Very few players who were going to expend their eligibility this season after 2023. There wasn't really necessarily a glaring position group of need, except for one that has been gutted the last 2 years, and we all know this. It's the secondary. So what did West Virginia's coaching staff did? They went out there and they bulked up on secondary commits. They got 7 commitments, 2 guys who were let go by the coaching staff later on, just like this past month or so, who decommitted, and I'll talk about them in a little while. Otherwise, they really relied on their camp attendees to collect admits across each position group. A lot of guys out of this commitment class that have unknown ceilings. So I think it validates the expert analysts' ranking in their eyes across rivals, across On3, across 247. But it fits into what Neal Brown likes to do with freshmen. He's got an old school kind of approach, in which there's a whole freshman developmental program that he talks about on his press conferences. If you listen to him, in some way, he separates these guys from the 40 to 45 to 50-ish who will play on Saturdays. He'll use them in tandem with his walk-on program, which he's loved to expand upon these last few years, who are really practice squad guys who get these underclassmen reps against college level, not high school level competition. And I like this approach because I totally understand it for guys who are third or deeper on the depth chart. They need to be in Mike Joseph's weight room, lifting program. They need to be in West Virginia's specialized nutrition program. They need to be in position meetings. But most important, they need practice reps, because on Saturdays or even Thursdays, they're standing on the sidelines for, 5-6 hours, going through the same kind of motions that the guys who play, but then they're just standing on the sidelines. So it counts even more and more to be a part of these scrimmages that he talks about with the underclassmen, with the developmental program guys, because he sees West Virginia being most competitive when West Virginia is playing predominantly 4th and 5th year guys at every single position, in hopes of catching blue bloods on their schedule in years in which those opponents are young. They may have 5 stars, and a lot of them, and a lot of 4 stars, but they're going to be young 4 and 5 stars. So while West Virginia can beat the teams that it should beat, and you're finally seeing that, I feel like, coming into to fruition in 2024. So it also, for these freshmen, I feel like cost Country Roads Trust less money in NIL for these incoming freshmen, because you're setting a low floor initially rather than paying top NIL dollars like you saw with Texas A&M just a couple of years ago, and you hear what Florida's doing and you hear what Miami's doing, and just throwing money at these high school recruits and getting in hopes of getting them to commit to your program, but then they transfer after a year or two and you have nothing to show for them and from what you've spent. And the biggest question I said for 2024 a month ago, was West Virginia going to be able to retain its indispensable players while going out there and getting some high quality transfers? So these high school recruits, I see kind of down in the, like, it's a win now kind of business. It is a win now kind of industry, and Neal Brown still, for a lot of this fan base, is still on a hot seat. And again, I can hear that kind of being justified if West Virginia doesn't go win 9 games in just a week's time against this North Carolina team that isn't going to practically have any of its starters from the regular season playing in this contest. So you got to go out there and win this one. So on the other hand, what I have noticed within the last year-ish is that West Virginia is having to compete harder than arguably ever before against primary recruiting rivals. And take a look at the numbers according to rivals. Penn State coming in 17th in the country, Pitt 39th, Maryland 34th, Rutgers, poor Rutgers 37th, Kentucky 25th, North Carolina 22nd, NC State 26th, even Virginia Tech, who comes in at 44th, below where West Virginia is slated in, has 6 4-star guys. So, they're just coming for guys in West Virginia's primary recruiting territories, while I'm witnessing increased competition from schools all over the country, like Texas A&M, like Oregon, USC, Florida, to collect talent. Now, Don Nehlen told Neal Brown this on his first day that he was hired or beforehand, and I think this has rung true for West Virginia solidly for 20 years-ish of my fandom, but I feel like you can go back even 50 years worth of history, is West Virginia has to recruit a 6-hour radius from Morgantown, so really the states of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, North Carolina, maybe a little into New York, in the state of Florida, the second cut of players in Florida. And West Virginia signed 19 out of 22 of those guys from those stomping grounds. So that's what's going to be successful for this program. But, and I'll talk about this at the end, I think if anything that this year proved in high school recruiting, it's that West Virginia needs to diversify this plan a little. And I'll get to that at the end. For now, I kind of want to walk you through just a brief. With 22 guys, if I do a minute or two's recap, we're going to be here all night. So I'm just going to give you kind of some of the quick highlights, just talk about each of these and kind of like the little bit of the background that maybe you didn't get from some of the other analysts, both from within the athletic department. I know WVU football did a whole show with Jed Drenning and Tony Creedy on it, and I love watching that show. It's great. And hearing Neal Brown, I'll talk about kind of like what he said at the end of the show on his signing day press conference that he held, and then some of the other shows out there. So the first recruit that we have to talk about, well, let's talk about the quarterback. Quarterback Khalil Wilkins, a 3-star, 5.5 rating. So why I mention these ratings is because with 3 stars, 5.5 is the lowest 3-star you can have. 5.6 medium, 5.7 is your highest 3-star. So your high quality 3-star, 5.7 guys. Once you get into 5.8, 5.9, we're talking about 4-star recruits. So 5.5 rating, and you'll hear that a lot throughout this as I break these recruits down. 6'4", 990-pound quarterback from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. West Virginia was the first Power 5 school to offer Wilkins a scholarship on May 18th. A day later, he received offers from Boston College and Pitt, then unofficially visited Pitt on June 19th. So it was during this time West Virginia was courting the top dual-threat quarterback in the state of Pennsylvania, Samaj Jones, from St. Joe's Prep, who had Penn State Oklahoma, Cincinnati, and West Virginia in his top fours. Now, Penn State and Oklahoma had already secured quarterback commits by the time Jones visited West Virginia on June 2nd, so forecasters had Jones pegged to West Virginia by his visit. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, Jones didn't commit. And after his visit, instead deciding to visit Cincy the next week and then Oklahoma the next. So apparently the West Virginia coaching staff moved on to Wilkins. He visited June 23rd and committed on his visit. Jones commits to Cincinnati a week later after his more preferred top three schools already got their quarterback, so he had to get what he could get at that point in Cincinnati. Now, what sucked for the whole situation is Wilkins was suspended by the Prince George's County Office of Interscholastic Athletics for his entire senior season due to transferring from Theodore Roosevelt High School to Wise High School in May. So no football for Khalil Wilkins this entire senior year for him. So I imagine that he'll go through the same kind of freshman developmental program that Sean Boyle went through this year. And I think this is the best case scenario for Khalil because he's got to get, he's a really thin guy, seeing some photos and videos of him. So get into Mike Joseph's strength and conditioning program, learn with this quarterback's core that, again, is going to be Garrett Green next year at 1. If Nico Marchiol sticks around for this next year, it's his team in 2025. So the earliest we're going to see Khalil Wilkins onto the field is 26. But if Marchiol stays all of his eligibility, it won't be until 27, and then he's got to jump Sean Boyle if Boyle sticks around that long. Now, I don't know whether it's good or bad that West Virginia got Wilkins compared to Samaj Jones. I've watched a lot of highlights of Samaj Jones, and he's extremely talented, extremely athletic, might not be as good of a passer as Khalil Wilkins. Again, we didn't get to see much, anything from him for the senior season for Wilkins, but apparently he put on a dazzling enough performance at the 7-on-7 visit when he was at West Virginia that Neal Brown just, said, we're moving on from Jones, we want Wilkins, and he's our guy, and the rest is history. So only time will tell if that was a better decision to move on from Jones or rather wait it out and go for Wilkins. So we'll have to see with that. The next guy I want to talk about, I'm really, really high on. So really, really thankful that he's a Mountaineer. Wide receiver Brandon Raymond, a 3-star, 5.6 rated, 6 foot, 185-pound wide receiver from Philadelphia, PA, St. Joe's Prep School, who whenever he signed was West Virginia, or whenever he committed back on June 13th, was West Virginia's highest recruited player, a 4-star, 5.8 rating. And fans like me were hoping that it was going to be a Samaj Jones, Brandon Raymond type of connection at the next level in a package deal like a few memorable quarterback tandems of old that were recruited by West Virginia. You can remember Taj Boyd, Logan Heasty, who committed to WVU, but then ultimately Boyd goes to Clemson. Heasty never makes it at West Virginia. And then, of course, Geno Smith, Stedman Bailey, maybe arguably the best quarterback wide receiver tandem in school history. So when West Virginia it was hot on Jones's trail, they got Raymond's commitment. You were all in for that. Taking a look at Raymond's senior season, just 23 catches, but for 430 yards on the season with 8 touchdowns, which included 1 rushing and 1 in the return game. Now, while I'll put that into perspective, St. Joe's Prep, the best program in the state of Pennsylvania and one of the best in the country. He also had to contend with wide receiver David Washington, who's a 4-star wide receiver committed to Kentucky, alongside Elijah Jones, a 3-star wide receiver committed to Cincinnati. So had to fight off for those guys for targets too. Jones likes to run a lot. They do run the ball too. So pretty much everyone on St. Joe's Prep is a Division I recruit. It just speaks volumes, I feel like, of the guys who are good enough to see the field at that school. So don't look too much into these numbers, I feel like, with Raymond. Watching his highlights, the one word I feel like that defines him, smooth in everything that he does. Just effortless in the way that he receives the ball, plays bigger than what he's listed at 6 foot. He's got Division I speed. He runs really, really nice routes. He's definitely more polished of a route runner than Rodney Gallagher was coming out of high school. since Gallagher spent most of his time at quarterback in high school. So I think Raymond's going to fit in great with this wide receiver group that's there, and then could enter into the picture as a return man or wide receiver as early as the back half of 2024. We'll talk about another receiver later that West Virginia got that maybe pushed back Raymond's time frame to get onto the field, but who knows? I'm really high, really on Brandon Raymond and really like him. Another guy who might have been the gem of this entire recruiting class, running back Dior Hubbard. 3-star, 5.6 rating according to Rivals, 5'11", 190 pounds, running back from Gahanna High School, Ohio, Lincoln High School, right outside of Columbus, Ohio. Looking at his all-state senior season, 223 carries for 1,883 yards and 28 rushing touchdowns, with 18 catches for 233 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. He had 9 100-plus yard games for Gahanna, who went 12-1 on the season. So watching his highlights, he looks to be the total package, both rushing and receiving. Just one who was a bit of a late bloomer, and with Ohio State attracting the top talent in the country, they didn't need the local product. So running backs coach Chad Scott is keeping the running back room competitive, I feel like. Already, seeing Justin Johnson enter the transfer portal. Expect to see Jalen Anderson next after the Mayo Bowl. I think West Virginia will have Donaldson and White sharing carries, with Hubbard really fighting with redshirt freshman DJ Oliver for carries at third string. Really excited to see what he can do at the next level in Dior Hubbard. So now let's transition to the offensive line, and the top recruit that West Virginia got on the offensive line was Kyle Altuner. 3-star, 5.6 rated, offensive guard, 6'3", 285 pounds, from Olney, Maryland, Our Lady of Good Counsel High School, a Maryland powerhouse program. Anyone who follows recruiting sees a ton of D1 prospects coming out of Our Lady of Good Counsel. And looking at Altuner's list of offers, Michigan, Louisville, Tennessee, all first offer Altuner as a junior. Unofficially visited Penn State 3 times, with visits also to Maryland and Michigan State, before he received his offer from West Virginia in January of this year. So unofficially visited Tennessee, Michigan State, and Penn State again, while collecting other offers from Kansas, Florida State, NC State, and Virginia. So had a long list of suitors. I think West Virginia was blessed to be his first official visit during West Virginia's first summer camp on June 2nd. And after visiting West Virginia the next weekend, he became one of the first commits of the 2024 cycle. An Under Armour All-American, after good counsel, went 10-1 on the season. And listening to Neal Brown talking about Altuner multiple times, he said today, as West Virginia's center of the future, paving the way for West Virginia's running back. So I think he'll join great company in the growing group of underclassmen who will all be vying for a shot at playing time once the current group of starters all graduate or go on to the NFL after next season. Altuner may end up being the best prospect out of this class, to see how he competes and how soon will he get to that center position starting. I'll talk about another guy in the offensive line, Justin Terry, just a 2-star, 5'2" rating, 6'5", 315 pounds, and that's what Brown said constantly about Terry, is he's just massive. An offensive tackle from Pickerington High School, Pickerington Central High School. I'm really not sure necessarily. There wasn't much to be found on Justin Terry. Maybe Brown and Matt Moore, the offensive line coach, just like his size. Doesn't have a single offer from a Power 5 school, but a long list of FCS and G5 schools. Collected his offer from West Virginia on June 23rd, committed June 29th, and took his official visit at the beginning of this month on December 1st. So I think it's a developmental prospect here in Justin Terry. Don't know much to say about him. Lucas Austin, another 2-star offensive line recruit, 5.4 rating. So I know, like, back-to-back, Carson, how many more 2-stars did we get? 6'7", 265-pound offensive tackle from Sterling, Illinois, Sterling High School. He was a guy who held FCS Ivy League and G5 offers throughout last spring, visited Iowa State unofficially in June, Northwestern in September, Notre Dame in October, then got the West Virginia offer in late October, visited 2 weekends ago, and committed last week. Now, Austin has the frame to potentially put on, I'd say, 40 to 50 pounds, where the coaches will want to see him before he touches the field. A two-sport high school athlete, so he has one of the keys that Neal Brown and staff look for that they point out. One is speed, the other is athleticism. If you hear the buzzwords with Neal Brown during any of his press conferences. So being a two-sport athlete, he's got that athleticism check mark to check the box, and I think that the staff is banking on the idea that he'll develop his coordination as he gets heavier and stronger. He's the prime example of a project player who has the size to play tackle. I can't see him, until at least 2026 with this team, and I think you take him because you have the scholarship available and hope that he sticks around at least 3 years and is patient in his developmental process here to eventually see the field. Moving on to tight ends, Jack Samarco, a 3-star, 5.6 rated tight end, 6'6", 220 from Cincinnati High School, Anderson High School. He was the second commit of the 2024 class and first and only for tight ends coach Blaine Stewart. After Stewart started last spring with the program, got Samarco on board quickly, put up a 35-catch, 624-yard with 5 touchdown junior season with 2 rushing touchdowns for Walnut Hills High School. Then he transferred to Anderson over the summer. Might have been a good move for him personally because Walnut Hills ended up going 0-10 this year. He played all 14 games for the 13-2 Anderson Raptors with 27 catches for 315 yards and 5 touchdowns. It took a bit of a back seat in the receiving department in comparison to what he had at Walnut Hills. And what I'll just say here is great. Get him in here. Don't mind at all if West Virginia takes 1 tight end recruit per cycle, but with 6 already ahead of Samarco on the roster, he's got to wait and he's got to wade through this already crowded position group and hope that 1 or 2 transfer down the road. So going to be a long time potentially until we see, as fans, Jack Samarco in a blue and gold uniform. I don't understand why West Virginia needs to have 8, 9 tight ends on the roster, but it is what it is at that point. So a little bit there on Jack Samarco. Moving on to another wide receiver, Keyshawn Richardson, 3-star, 5.5 rated, 5'11", 175-pound wide receiver from Shenandoah Junction, West Virginia, the second best prospect in the state of West Virginia according to Rivals, and was WVU's first commit of the 2024 class back last April. So a receiving and rushing threat who finished Class AAA All-State for Jefferson High School, who went 9-3 this season and finished as the 7th best team in the Max Preps West Virginia State rankings for the year. He was also All-State in track, running the 100, 200, and 400. So again, he has Neal Brown's favorite trait, speed. Just 22 catches for 247 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving, with 17 carries for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing this year. So I respect the young man's abilities, but we'll see if he can make the transition to Division I Power 5 football like Hudson Clement has. So with numbers like that really don't pop off the page, I don't really know much what to think outside of Keyshawn Richardson, but if you are a Mountaineer fan and see a lot of high school football, love to hear what you think about him. It sounds like another prospect I'll talk about, Dominic Collins, kind of outshined him this season, but because of all the success that Richardson had last year as a junior, that West Virginia wanted to get him committed on board as the second best prospect in the state. So again, there's 7, 8, 9 guys on the depth chart in front of Richardson. So maybe by 2026 that we'll see if he's ready at that point in time to start contributing. But I see him as primed as a redshirt candidate who really doesn't see the field at all in 2024. So let's move to the opposite side of the ball on the defensive line. Let's talk about their number one defensive recruit, and that would be Obinna Onwuka, a 3-star, 5.7 rated defensive end, 6'4", 235 pounds from Springdale, Maryland, Flowers High School. And West Virginia really fended off a pretty lengthy list of suitors for Onwuka's services, including a hard push from Virginia Tech. USC, Penn State, Boston College, Tech, Maryland, and Wisconsin all offered Onwuka before he visited West Virginia first officially on June 2nd and committed later that week. Now, he only played in 6 games this season as a senior with just 11 total tackles, but 6 were for loss and 2 sacks. I'm seeing Onwuka on film in the down defensive end position in a 4-3 stack, so not necessarily as a linebacker, which makes me think that, and Brown kind of spoke to this, calling him an edge rusher, that he is going to be in the stand-up bandit position linebacker like many of the mold before him. Now, if you followed my program these last several weeks, you know that I've been very critical and still will be critical moving ahead for 2024 about what this bandit position is and what its primary responsibility should be. So with Onwuka on the team and some of the other, pass rushers that we just saw, Ty French come into this program and Tyron Bradley, does Onwuka become that pass rusher who can play at 250 pounds and flourish, and will Jordan Leslie in this system blitz the bandit position more, or will he follow in the footsteps of James Hurd? And, I still think there's more to be said and more to be found out about James Hurd's story and why he transferred out of West Virginia in this bandit position. So makes a lot of sense that he's going to fit there. I just hope for both West Virginia's sake and for Onwuka's sake that everything works out if he is into that bandit position. So really going to be watching that position and him specifically with a lot of intrigue over these next couple of years. Then moving on, Mekhi Byerson, 3-star, 5.6 rated defensive end, 6'5", 250 pounds from Midlothian, Virginia, Manchester High School. And just like Onwuka, Byerson had a growing list of Power 5 offers as a junior: Tennessee, Boston College, Rutgers, Kentucky, Duke, Pitt, Maryland, and Virginia, before West Virginia got him on campus officially first on June 2nd. Byerson still visited Rutgers, Kentucky, and Virginia Tech officially before ultimately choosing West Virginia, and that was even after Onwuka committed, so another guy at his defensive end position. Now, I think he had as equally as productive of a senior season as his junior season, and these numbers pop off the page to me. Listen to this: 103 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks at the down defensive end position. Now, he doesn't have the fastest get-off that I've ever seen by a WVU high school prospect, but he took on every blocker I saw in his highlights and either stopped them in their tracks or pushed them back and immediately attacked the ball carrier. So in run defense, I really like what I see against Byerson, I guess less than I do as a pass rusher. He also plays basketball, so just like his dad, Brad, who played at West Virginia in 2004 to 2005. So he has Neal Brown's favorite athleticism, and he's a legacy. So check 2 boxes there. Caught a nice jump ball for a touchdown this season, too, in a one-on-one fade route from 3 yards out. So he's got skills, and he's got that athleticism. Get him in here. Got to get him on this team. So I think he's a guy who we will have to watch how he develops, where he fits as he gets bigger with time, maybe playing upwards to like 280, 285. Could he play the strong side defensive end like Sean Martin does in this system? I really like this fit for him to be like the first contributing member out of this group on this defensive line to see, or I guess I like the defensive end because I really like their defensive tackle prospect, who I'll talk about in a second, but really like where Byerson's trajectory is on this team too, and within the roster too. Talking about another at the same position, Elijah Kinsler, 3-star, 5.5 rated, defensive end, 6'4", 250 pounds from Oradell High School, Bergen Catholic High School, one of the best programs in the state of New Jersey. Took an unofficial visit to Rutgers and Pitt before receiving his offer from West Virginia in January of this year. He was the second Power 5 team. West Virginia was the second Power 5 team to offer him just after Boston College. Then he received other Power 5 offers from Purdue, Louisville, and Miami before committing to West Virginia for his official visit on June 2nd, when he committed 9 days later. Still visited Syracuse, then unofficially visited Rutgers again in September, but did not flip. Put together a first-team All-State campaign for the New Jersey powerhouse that went 11-1 this year, 63 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. So you may remember seeing Kinsler on social media back in late August when he was trash-talking Pitt commit Davin Bruton at the coin toss prior to Bergen Catholic's game against Red Bank Catholic. And I just think, like Byerson, Kinsler's going to perform best when he bulks up to 280 plus and can play either end of the defensive line, perhaps in, say, 2026. And if he can pass up any of the guys on the depth chart, which may include Byerson, that's the way that we see him on the field. So seeing him on that defensive line with Byerson, and then on the opposite side of the bandit would be on Wuka. So then, to complete the front four, Nate Gabriel, 3-star, 5.6 rated, defensive tackle, 6'4", 285 pounds from Auburndale, Florida, Auburndale High School, the same high school as current WVU starting safety Aubrey Burks, which is southwest of Orlando, right near Lakeland, in between Orlando and Tampa, if you're wondering where that is. I had to look that one up. And Gabriel was a guy who picked up just one Power 5 offer, Illinois, but a bunch of G5 offers before getting offered from West Virginia in April. Then K-State did a month after. And he was a part of the same June 2nd camp visit as the other defensive line commits, but didn't commit until 2 months later, right before the high school season started, as South Florida has been hot on his trail the entire recruiting cycle, and reportedly LSU was late this week. So he had an incredibly productive senior campaign for Auburndale, who went just 7-4 on the season. Listen to these numbers. I love this tackles for loss stat. 74 total tackles, which was second best on his team. There's another guy, a sophomore, at over 100. I hope West Virginia gets after him for recruiting. 26 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. Also a state champion heavyweight wrestler, and we all know how wrestlers with Zach Frazier do on this team. I think the staff will probably want to see Gabriel play up at over 300 pounds at the nose tackle position, so we'll see how quickly he can make his presence known at a position that's had a ton of turnover these last few years, with Jordan Jefferson and Mike Lockhart only starting for a single season. And it may be because of all that turnover that Neal Brown said today he sees Gabriel making an immediate impact. Now, I'm intrigued by Gabriel, who will apparently be enrolling in January, so he'll get a full off-season with Mike Joseph and staff. If he can put on 15 pounds by the beginning of the season, who knows? He might be West Virginia's second-string defensive tackle, or rotate in if West Virginia doesn't decide to bring in any more defense nose tackle recruits, and Fatorma Mulba and Hammond Russell are your really only true nose tackle guys, and Asani Redwood and Tamia Durage still stay at the defensive ends position. So very intrigued by Nate Gabriel. Now I'll transition and talk about the defensive backs, and there's not a lot to say, I feel like, individually, so I'm kind of group them together. The staff really spread the scholarships around to a bunch of similar types of hybrid defensive backs who we really won't know who will play until next season's depth chart, I feel like, finally comes out. So you have Chris Henry, a 3-star from Dunellen, Florida. Israel Boyce, a 3-star from Douglasville, Georgia. Jason Cross, 3-star from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Bishop Canavan High School, if you're watching this program and are familiar with Pittsburgh high schools like myself. Zay Jennings, 3-star from Winton Woods High School, the same high school as David Long in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Keon Washington, 3-star from Waldorf, Maryland. I won't spend a lot of time on these guys because, again, kind of hybrid between figuring out whether they're going to be best fit within this scheme at cornerback or safety, kind of all around the same ratings. And kind of the offers were spread, I feel like, best to Cross and best to Boyce had more Power 5 offers than the other three. But again, all players who West Virginia had seen in camp-style situations and performed, the top performers at these camps that they've held. So that's why the staff jumped on them. So West Virginia did have 2 players, as I mentioned in the intro, who were committed but then decommitted, who apparently it was on the side of West Virginia who kind of let them go. It was Jaquan Bostic, who was a 3-star safety from Cincinnati, who ultimately committed to Toledo, and then Keelan Flo, 3-star safety from Charlotte, North Carolina, who after about a week or so of being decommitted from West Virginia, committed to James Madison. So, again, some guys that West Virginia staff recruited who weren't necessarily Power 5 prospects, but G5 prospects. So, let them go. West Virginia also had, at one point in time this past summer, O.J. Frederic, who flipped to Miami the same month that he committed to West Virginia, so really wasn't ever, I feel like, committed in a way to West Virginia, just trying to get the Miami commit, and the guy from there too. So let's talk about the linebackers. And what I'll say about the linebackers is I feel like West Virginia really shot its shot at linebacker in the recruiting cycle with guys like Montel Johnson, who picked Rutgers, Nicholas Rodriguez, who picked Missouri, and Cam Lindsey, who picked Pitt, before West Virginia ultimately settled with Ricky Williams, a 3-star, 5'6" linebacker, 6'2", 235 pounds from Akron, Ohio, Archbishop Hoban High School, one of the best programs in the state of Ohio. West Virginia was his first offer on January 31st, and then a slew of G5 offers came in. Just one other Power 5 offer came Williams' way, Indiana, and that came over Williams' visit to West Virginia on June 10th, when then 10 days later Williams committed. So his self-reported stats, I couldn't find them anywhere online, but checking on his Twitter, he says he had 93 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. He played for a program that went 50-8 during his high school career and made it to the Ohio State championship game this year. So he comes from a good high school program. Let's get him in here at 6'2", 235. A couple of years to play behind like a Josiah Trotter, Ben Cutter, etc. Like, get him in here, get him into the fold, get him a part of the group, and hopefully, 2 or 3 years down the line, he's ready to start contributing. And then staying with another local product, Curtis Jones Jr., 3-star, 5.5 rated linebacker, just 6'1", 205 pounds from Barbersville, West Virginia, Cabell Midland High School. West Virginia's gotten quite a few Cabell Midland guys, both scholarship guys and walk-ons throughout the years. And taking a look at some of his numbers that he had as a junior, I'm sure what popped off the page to Neal Brown and staff to offer him. Ran an 11.89 100 meters in track, while also competing on the 4x100 team, so he's got that speed that Neal Brown loves. Class AAA All-State at running back, had 1,119 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns as a junior. Didn't have another Power 5 offer, did have offers from Eastern Kentucky, Toledo, and Marshall. So he committed to West Virginia on July 30th over the summer. I think he is the perfect prime example of a project player that Neal Brown, just loves the athleticism and skill set, and they'll try to mold him and find him a position on the field to play football. So we'll see what happens with him and how he's molded over the course of 2 to 3 years. So then I want to talk about the 3 guys that West Virginia received commitments from today that you weren't necessarily expecting. And, first and foremost, we'll stay with the local product after talking with Curtis Jones. Dom Collins from Princeton, West Virginia, Princeton High School, just 5'10", 65 pounds. We'll call him an offensive side of the ball athlete. He was the Class AAA All-State player and Metro News' Player of the Year after leading Princeton to its first ever state championship game, where he caught 7 passes for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns in that contest, tied the state record with 27 receiving touchdowns this season on 83 catches for 1,897 yards. So, wow, did Collins have an awesome senior year. I think the surprise here for all of Mountaineer Nation was that West Virginia did in fact present him with a scholarship and not necessarily a preferred walk-on position. So I think the staff thinks that highly of him and his abilities. And I think one or the other is going to cancel the other one out. It's either Keyshawn Robinson or it's going to be Dom Collins, who end up eventually, I feel like, sticking with this program. And hopefully they get an opportunity, just like another West Virginia boy did in Preston Fox, and made the most of it now that he is in his 4th and, looking ahead, 5th seasons. So it's going to take a while. It's going to take Collins to continue to develop and to continue to have that all-class speed, and hopefully years down the road he can develop into a contributor. Also at running back, 3-star, 5.5 rated running back Trayvon Dunbar from Aiken, South Carolina, Midland Valley High School, 5'9", 205 pounds. Just the second player in South Carolina high school football to rush for over 3,000 yards in a single season, and he did that this year. Scored 42 rushing touchdowns with a 10.2 yards per carry average. Wow. What a productive high school year. Insane. I think it's strange that neither South Carolina nor Clemson offered him, but that's WVU's gain and their loss. And neither did North Carolina as well, just to his north. So I think they're probably a little bit wary of his size at 5'9", 205. I think he's a guy that is going to be thankfully afforded time. If he's patient himself, or unless he's like a very Sparrow and after not seeing the field for 2 seasons, wants to go and transfer to Florida International, that could be the way of Dunbar, unfortunately, with West Virginia. But, West Virginia, he's going to be behind C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White. I doubt he'll be the same kind of power back that DJ Oliver is at 240 pounds. So he's going to have to contend, I feel like, with Hubbard to potentially see the field maybe in 2026. So we'll see what he does. Get him into this room. That's awesome. It's a great running back room, great culture, great coaching staff there with Chad Scott and some of these guys who are still kind of young, you would say, in C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White, but it's just going to make that room that much more competitive having him a part of the team. So glad to have him. And then wide receiver, Rick Darius Day Farmer. This is where I want to spend a little time. 4-star, 5.8 rating from Melbourne, Florida, Melbourne Central Catholic High School, just 6 foot, 165-pound wide receiver. And what an interesting journey for young Mr. Farmer, who was committed to Pitt from last April to August 1st, then committed to UCF from August 1st till now. Now flipped on signing day to West Virginia. Now, West Virginia, Neal Brown credited Chad Scott and wide receivers coach Bilal Marshall for being on him throughout the entire recruiting process, which spanned over 2 years, including Farmer's official visit in Morgantown on June 9th. Now, you watch his highlights, and from his jumping ability to the agile moves that he puts on defenders, wow. He could be a guy who really competes, I feel like, with the starting 4 or 5 that are a part of the starting crew for this wide receiver core, but is going to have to put on some weight, get stronger, if he's going to take the kind of pounding that comes with playing in the Power 4 Big 12 conference, and also be able to block. So that's where he's going to have to put on some weight, I feel like, before he sees the field, but he's got a lot of talent in that body, in that frame. I'm just worried, though, about a guy who commits to 3 different schools during the recruiting process in this NIL transfer portal era, and where players aren't patient whatsoever. Especially coming from the state of Florida, does UCF come calling back next year with a boatload of cash or trying to get him to transfer? So doesn't usually work out for these kinds of players, but Brown talked about how creating a good culture within a position group room, maybe being around Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, Preston Fox, some of these older guys, and then competing also with Raymond alongside of him, that he'll have a good room to be around, and will stick it out with this program for more than a year. So we'll see with Mr. Day Farmer, but happy to have him. Glad West Virginia could get a 4-star commit as a part of this class. One that lasted too, in addition to, Raymond should be a 4-star recruit. So I think there are 4 guys that I want to talk about for a second here that were misses, and then I'll wrap this video up. So I know we're coming upon an hour or so. So the misses that West Virginia had that I feel like that were the biggest in recruiting were 3-star offensive lineman Robbie Martin from Huntington, West Virginia, the #1 player in the state of West Virginia. West Virginia, again, misses out for the 2nd consecutive year on the #1 recruit in the state of West Virginia, losing to Lath Ganem, you can remember a cycle ago, to Virginia Tech. Now this year, losing out to Robbie Martin to NC State in Tony Gibson's team. So you really would have liked to have Robbie Martin. I know he visited on campus. West Virginia made a hard push for him to get him in a Mountaineer uniform, but ultimately didn't believe in the program or in the trajectory in comparison to what NC State was. So disappointed in that. I was also really disappointed in losing out to Maryland. If you follow my program, I do not like since 2021. 4-star offensive lineman Ryan Howerton from Baltimore, so a local big guy there. You can kind of understand that. But West Virginia's done so well in Maryland throughout the year. So losing out to the Twerps on Ryan Howerton to get him in, how great this offensive line's been now for 2 consecutive seasons and trending up. Would have been great to get him into the fold for the future. 4-star linebacker Nicholas Rodriguez, who also visited over the summer. Fort Lauderdale, Florida, chose Missouri, also had Tennessee on his short list. So West Virginia missed out on Rodriguez. And then another linebacker, so, swung once, swung twice on linebackers in 4-star linebacker Cam Lindsey, Aliquippa High School, the best high school football team, right upside. Well, probably that's a public high school, the best public high school in the state of Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh. Ended up choosing Pitt over West Virginia, also in considerations for Penn State, but they're loaded at linebacker, so he chooses the Panthers instead. So those are the big 4 misses I feel like that West Virginia had in this cycle that you'd like to have as part of this program, but you win some, you lose some in high school recruiting. So in summary, just to close this video, I'm content overall, I would say, with this signing class, because I don't see any sort of glaring need at any position group that demands an instant impact player that is going to come from the true freshman ranks. And that's usually a sign of a rebuilding program anyway, just like Colorado had this last year. And I'm willing to give Neal Brown and staff leeway, given the successes they've had in 2021, 2022, and 2023. These last 3 recruiting classes have been so much better than the first 2 that West Virginia had in 2019 and 2020. Don't even go back and look at those classes, or you'll just want to cover your eyes and of what West Virginia's had to overcome. But these last 3, including this one, so much better. I feel like so much better. And I think it comes back to, if you listen to Brown's press conference and his kind of overall summation of the day, relationships, especially from these younger coaches, Bilal Marshall and Blaine Stewart, who were both on the 30 under 30 in Division I assistant coaching ranks. Two guys who I think who have set a great first year, I feel like, in recruiting, and can go only up from here. And maybe I'm not sure. I didn't look this up beforehand. If they're not married, and they can just fully dedicate all of their time and efforts into this, because we know how demanding that college football, especially because of recruiting in today's world, can be. And these guys in Marshall and Stewart, if they can go out there, eat, sleep, breathe, drink this, that they're going to be successful and could climb the ranks higher and higher. So it's to West Virginia as a program's benefit. And it's awesome to have Blaine Stewart in there, who can talk about his dad. And he's, I think they're both a great yield tool, who can talk about the history and how much he loves West Virginia, because that's going to, ring true in stories and access to players that he has from, back in the day. And then the locker room culture lessons that Neal Brown's learned over the years. He talked about this during his press conference, about being a little bit more conservative on his selections, who are guys who could, potentially, poison the well, you could say, at a position group. We can think back to how much turnover the wide receiver room had in previous years. Still had a lot of turnover in the defensive back room. We've had a lot of turnover in the transfer portal in these last, not this past year, but you can remember back in 2021 and 2022. So Brown's just being careful, it seems like, in what guys he brings into the program and which ones that he spends time in recruiting, in comparison to maybe going out there and bringing in a guy who isn't a right character or culture fit. So on one hand I like that. On one hand I don't necessarily like that, because that's kind of where I want to conclude this video, and where I see what West Virginia needs to do for starting is, on 2025 already has started, even maybe late to a certain extent on this 2025 class, because the Blue Bloods already have guys committed already for next year, and even the year after that. So ultimately, can West Virginia make some inroads on any of these top prospects? It's now 17 years since West Virginia has signed a 5-star player, and this year yielded the fewest number of 4-star recruits in a long time. I didn't do the research to see exactly, but before getting Day Farmer, after Raymond was relegated to a 3-star prospect, West Virginia didn't have a 4-star prospect according to Rivals until today. So, I get that the talent is despairingly located in the South and the West, and it's challenging to get those guys to West Virginia for various reasons. Not even necessarily talking about all the increased competition that you face from other schools in those states across the country. But it's that's what I feel like Neal Brown needs to do to maximize his potential here. And Mountaineer Nation has seen the writing on the wall, I feel like, for over a decade now, since before Dana Holgerson's time, like the end of the Bills. I feel like Geno Smith's class was the last one that you can really point to it, that West Virginia has to take the next step up in recruiting closer to the top 25 in the country. Raise the overall level of recruit that West Virginia is bringing in as freshmen, who will have legitimate interest from prospects at these Rivals camps, national 7-on-7 tournaments, etc. And I know that there's a lot that goes into it, and brand awareness and recognition, and how many guys that you're putting into the NFL and contending for conference championships, and all of that matters. That when a West Virginia coach walks at a camp and is wearing a West Virginia shirt like myself with that logo, that logo means something to some of these recruits. If they don't care and they just want to see an Oklahoma OU or an Alabama A or a Clemson C or an Ohio State O, and they see West Virginia and they just laugh and don't care that you're even there, Like that's other issues that West Virginia needs to solve to get this logo to represent and mean something now to 15 to 18-year-old kids in today's world. That these last 15 years, have you lost the kind of brand recognition that West Virginia had, 20 years ago? Or even going back to the Orange Bowl of just 10 years ago, or now 11 years ago. So if you're gonna as a program, put all of your eggs in the hometown summer camps and relying on finding your guys from just there, that's not necessarily enough. I think that you got to identify these guys. And that's hard, but that's why they pay these, recruiting staff the way that they do. And now, looking ahead, this is going to be the first high school recruiting class that Drew Fabianich can have his, signature stamp on the recruiting class, because most of this class was taken care of before July 1st, so it doesn't have his fingerprints all over it. It has the previous staff and some of the new guys on the staff. But Drew Fabianich, in addition to being a part of the retention and transfer recruiting efforts, going to have to see how we do now with high school recruits. And then you got to go to some of these places, develop some, or penetrate some potential new markets out there. I don't know, in the state of Arizona, in the state of Texas, in the state of Georgia, Louisiana. Go out there and get some signees from some places that might not necessarily be in your fishing pool of your backyard because it's getting overfished. I mean, Penn State still dominates the state of Pennsylvania. Ohio State dominates the state of Ohio. As I said, increased competition from Maryland in the state of Maryland. So where's West Virginia going to go? The state of West Virginia cannot supply West Virginia for all of its recruits. Now, I get it. You can't have this complete hands-off approach that Dana Holgerson had in the state. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just because a kid, comes from this, how many recruits have we talked about over time? Ryan Switzer, Darnell Wright, who Dana Holgerson just refused to recruit. Doug Nestor, refused to recruit, pay any, put any, but he was just lazy. He was just a lazy recruiter. So not even getting guys or not even caring enough to go and recruit your own state. You can still find some gems, and who knows, maybe Jones, maybe Collins, maybe Richardson are some guys that will end up panning out for this program. That's great. That's awesome for the program. That really is. But you got to go. You can't, I guess, just sit back on your laurels and expect the recruits to come to you. You have to go get them. And that's where, again, it takes money, first and foremost. It takes your staff. It takes, identifying the right fits, going after legacy prospects, going after guys who have some sort of connection, either through their high school coach. I mean, Brown talked about that ad nauseum with these recruits, about whose coaches parents had any sort of ties back to the program or were from there, et cetera, et cetera. But West Virginia's got to start walking in there and looking at this rivals top 250 class. And if we can't see West Virginia get one guy, and I also know it's position group dependent. So if these guys don't see themselves being able to come in and get immediate or playing time after a single year, you're not going to have as great of a shot. And now also think about all of the changing development with the SEC and the Big Ten becoming really the Super 2 conferences. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I could talk about this till the cows come home, but I want to know how you feel. I want to know how you feel about this recruiting class, good, bad, indifferent. What do you see for the future for West Virginia high school recruiting? Or should we not even care because it's the transfer portal era and then you can just backfill any single time on any given year in getting transfer recruits? So am I making something out of nothing, or do I see, see through behind behind the scenes, between the lines, that West Virginia, to be the best that it can be, needs to, well, again, also be in a conference in which it's playing its traditional rivals again, to build that brand awareness in this mid-Atlantic Northeast region again, but also just ultimately, the ends and the means, the ends being that West Virginia recruits high school talent better. And how do you go about doing that? While also understanding the resources that you have to put in for retention and also for transfer portal recruiting. So I want to hear your thoughts. Comment here on YouTube. If you like this video, like it so that more fans can see it around YouTube. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun bringing it to you. So check out some of the other videos on my channel, and if you like some of those as well, subscribe. Love to get to close to 200 subscribers or more by the end of this regular season. So I love doing this for y'all. Love being able to share my thoughts with you, all these crazy thoughts that I have in this brain of mine to talk about West Virginia football. And it was an awesome, time to talk about National Signing Day this year. So, comment here on this video on YouTube or catch me on Twitter at Carson_Fox27. And I'll be back next week as we preview the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.